After 10 days, the prosecution has rested its case against Paul Manafort. Before they did, the jury heard from a witness, Jim Brennan, vice president of a bank that found several red flags while considering whether to loan Mr. Manafort $16 million. That gets your attention. Brennan detailed false paperwork and misleading information from Manafort's applications, including outstanding debt, undisclosed mortgages. The president of the bank had rejected the loan request, but the decision was overturned by the bank's CEO, who, according to another witness and a key document, was hoping to get a top job in the Trump administration. Now, tomorrow, Manafort's attorneys are expected to reveal whether or not they will call Manafort himself to the stand. With us to talk about all of it, two people who were in court today. Daniel Goldman, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and Los Angeles Times reporter Chris Megerian, who covers the special counsel investigation. Daniel, we're very glad you've been willing to dip into the court proceedings as our kind of special correspondent this week. What struck you as this of all its case?
Well, the one thing that really stood out is this CEO that you mentioned, Stephen Calk. It was almost as if the defense was starting to lay the foundation for an argument that Paul Manafort in some ways is so dirty that the real reason he got this loan was not because he committed bank fraud, but because he offered to do a personal favor for the CEO by trying to get him an administration job. And that for them basically to set up the argument to say, hey, this might be a bad guy and he might have done a bad thing to get this loan, but it's not the bad thing that's charged in this indictment. So you have to say that, you have to vote not guilty.
Chris, I am looking at this email. I am holding it in my hand. This bank CEO just talks openly about the job titles he'd like, starting with Secretary of the Army, Treasury, and then ambassadorships. The UK, France, Germany, some big allies of ours. Talk about the nexus between the Trump campaign and this Manafort case.
Well, this is actually one of the most interesting parts of the trial, because this is one of the few places where this trial actually overlaps with politics and the Trump campaign. Most of the charges have nothing to do with the campaign or Paul Manafort's work on the campaign. However, here's a situation where a bank CEO allegedly wanted a job so much on the campaign and therefore afterwards on the Trump administration that he was willing to put up his own company's money, $16 million, to secure himself a spot in that administration, a job he did not eventually get. But still, that's quite the bet.
Daniel, prediction. Does Manafort take the stand? Would you put him on? And how much of a case do you think the defense will mount?
I would be absolutely shocked if Manafort took the stand. I think the defense's view is, our theory of the case is that we were going to attack Rick Gates and put it all on him. We got pretty good traction from our cross-examination on that. We're not going to mess with that by putting someone like Manafort on the stand. And because that's their theory, I actually think they very well may not call any witnesses at all and just play the government didn't meet its burden defense by saying we don't need any witnesses because they didn't even make their case.
Wow, that'll be interesting to watch. And Chris Megerian, what do you still want answered?
Well, at this point, definitely want to see what the defense is going to do if they have other information about Rick Gates that would further undermine his credibility. They asked a lot of questions about, was Rick Gates honest in this moment? Was Rick Gates honest in that moment? Could they present evidence to show that he wasn't honest in a situation we don't know about yet? We're not sure. Hopefully we'll find out more tomorrow.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.